So last Friday, Joe Biden fell 3 times as he attempted to board Air Force One. And then the White House later said this was because of strong winds, making Joe Biden the first public victim of climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Ruthless.
Democrats are set to take control of the U.S. Senate, House, and the White House.
This will go down as one of the most progressive administrations in American history.
God willing, everything is on the table.
You now can pass things without a filibuster threat.
That's right.
Oh, you'll regret this, and you may regret it a lot sooner than you think.
You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
Well, good Tuesday to you, and welcome to the variety program. We have got a doozy for you today.
Yeah, this one's action-packed, right? We got a solid lineup of content. I mean, we are blessed with everything the left has been doing lately, whether it's Joe Biden falling up the stairs, whether it is turning the border into an absolute crisis, you name it.
I mean, so good. And also this episode, I should add, is brought to you by Heritage Action, who is a partner that we have. If regular listeners of the program will appreciate, they are leading the way to try to stop the Corrupt Politicians Act, known to our listeners as HR 1 that we've talked about here for the last 6 weeks. They are partnering with us. We are partnering with them. We need to stop this. We're very happy to have their support of the program.
Yeah, it's always appreciated. And folks, we really do need to get the word out about HR 1, how this is essentially just the Dem Permanent Majority Act and letting them steal it on a federal level, moving control of elections from state to federal. But what else we got on the show today?
Yeah, let's not make everybody eat their broccoli up top, right? We have Cocaine Mitch is here.
Let's
the
go.
bourbon is here.
Let's go.
This is going to be a free-flowing episode. We're fired up. I think we need to stop and take note of where we're at in the hack bracket, though.
Yeah, folks. So if you've been following along, this is the second annual Liberal Hack Tournament that is underway right now. This is the real March Madness. It's the Hack Madness, where we pit 66, counting the two play-ins, 66 of the biggest liberal hacks in media today against each other in a March Madness style bracket. And we already are looking at some monumental upsets here.
The first round has been historic, shall we say.
Yeah.
And, I'm a big college basketball fan. I've been watching the tournament. I've clearly been following our own tournament here with the hack bracket. I couldn't help but notice the similarity between Jeffrey Toobin and Oral Roberts.
Yeah, right. Yeah, 16 beats a 1. And I actually threw this in the Slack. I don't know if you guys remember this from over the weekend, but I really want to record some sort of like Miracle on Ice, sort of like color commentary call, for Toobin. If he keeps going in deep and makes a deep run in this tournament, we may need some sort of, call.
That's putting your thumb on the scale because the people love when we sing and dance on the variety program.
Okay, well, we won't do it then.
They do. You're thumbing the scale. Well, it's better than, well, no, you know what? We've got a distinguished program that's sponsored, and we have the Republican leader of the Senate on. I'm not going to go too far down that rabbit. I want you to know I wanted to.
Good.
But I will say, look, there's a couple things that we need to point out here because the takeaways, other than Toobin shocking the world with an upset of Matt Dowd, are that there are some people who are making a run, and they are really putting together. Like, I gotta be honest, I think Bill Kristol could win this thing.
Yeah, just the other day, Kristol puts out this tweet advocating for DC statehood, where it's just like,
he's
this
the
guy
best.
used to be, like, in theory, a conservative commentator. Like,
It's so good. So he's got, he blows right through Andrea Mitchell, who's like a first ballot Hall of Fame hack.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, she's done it day in and day out for 30 years.
I mean, you look at that establishment bracket. I mean, Andrea Mitchell is right there. You think of, the establishment liberal hack, old guard. She's right there and just ran through it.
Yeah, he hangs 80 plus, and then he gets Final Four finisher Maddow for his pleasure, and Rachel Maddow is getting drummed by Crystal as well. So I don't know how it's going to shake out. He's going to have to go through Tubin.
So I see your Crystal though, and I raise you an Aaron Root bar.
That's what I wanted to say. That is really the embodiment of getting hot at the right time in the tourney, where he's just going off. To be able to create fake news that the Chinese Communist Party runs with is like next level hackery.
Next level
Yeah,
stuff.
if any of our listeners missed that, basically what happened is Rupar took a selective edit to the press conference of a local was it a sheriff basically after the horrible shooting that happened at those spas in Georgia, and made it sound like the sheriff was just saying that the shooter had a bad day.
Yeah.
And
instead of being honest and saying that's a direct quote.
Well, I mean, what he's doing is he's trying to paraphrase. They're asking him, what did he say? They're trying to get at his motive and all this sort of stuff, which is, that's part of being a good reporter. Like, you want to figure out what this shooter is motivated by. And so the sheriff just, basically relaying what this shooter told him. Then Rupar takes a selective clip out of that to make the sheriff look like he's some sort of like alt-right bad guy.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And then, like you said, Smug, of course, the Communist Party in China turns around and takes Rupar's content and is like, look, this is America, horrible racist place. Why they have concentration camps in their country.
Unreal. That is that. I mean, way to show up in March at the right time with your hackery, Aaron Rupar. He's in it to win it.
He is. He's crushing. He's crushing Oliver Darcy right now.
Yeah.
Which is shocking.
Yeah.
Shocking, because you look at Darcy's body of work. The guy used to be a conservative. Like, he was like a college Republican. And then he was like, you know what? I want to get a CNN contract. It's time to go hack.
Does he qualify as a King of the Hill participant?
That's a good point.
So some people have asked about,
you have to have
Twitter.
some conservative bona fides at some point.
I think the way that we had initially set it up, it was pretty exclusive to people who are like never Trump, people who still publicly claim to be conservatives,
yeah,
right. And so it's I don't think he qualifies.
So he doesn't, because he doesn't claim it,
right?
Okay, all right. Well, that's fair. I still think, look, if we let him into that tournament, he'd be a force. That would that would be a problem. I don't know, though. Crystal is the King of the Hill. He'll be King of the Hill for a while, in my view, because he is just fantastic. We're going to get you one of those later this week for sure. But we wanted to make sure to give an update on the brackets, because that's all anybody's talking about. First of all, Fox News is covering the brackets, the hack brackets, as if it's March Madness, which I just gratefully appreciate.
Well, if you look at the numbers, they've been just astronomical. Like, we cracked 100,000 votes cast in just the first round. So
yeah, I think in total in the first round, after you publish the other side of the bracket, I think we crossed 200,000 votes.
Moly.
Yeah, in that first round. You love to see it.
You love to see it, folks. You'll love to see it.
You're not surprised to see Ruben. You're not surprised to see Stelter. Last year's championship matchup, giving it hell again, posting mid-90s in each matchup.
Incredible. It's incredible. Dynasties.
Yeah, but back to what you were saying, Holmes, about King of the Hill. It's like, it's sort of tough for us to run that game during the tournament because you don't want to put your thumb on the scale.
Yep.
Right.
Which means, oh gosh, we're leaving some real good content out there that we
because it's a fair. We believe in free and fair elections, folks. we aren't putting out our personal brackets that could influence the outcome. This is the people voting. We're doing this legally. One person, one vote.
That's right. We're going to get in. In our HR1 segment, we're going to get deeply into fairness of elections. But first, we want to tackle the border crisis, which, evidently the administration is still having trouble wrapping their minds around the fact that they have a crisis. But
and you can't even get Mayorkas to say the word crisis. It's incredible. You have record numbers of people at the border. You have record number of children being thrown in cages by this administration. And FEMA's down there now, and they still won't call it a crisis.
And they've made the one mistake a Democrat can make with the press. It's the only thing you can do not to just get stenography as your newspapers and newscasts. It's to limit access, to pretend like you're hiding something. Once you do that to a press corps, even if you're a Democrat, they're going to bite you in the ass. And so they did that last week, and they limited access, and they wouldn't tell people what's going on down at the border. They heard horror stories about, 3 and 4 times capacity of some of these facilities that are housing children being just overrun, and nobody could go down and see it. And so some pictures were taken by a Democratic congressman that sort of confirmed what was happening. And all of a sudden, now Katie bar the door. We've got people are interested. Nobody was interested, by the way, when Joe Biden told everybody to come to the border. Right? Nope. That's just good politics, right? But now that they've followed through and decided to come to the border in their Joe Biden T-shirts, well, now it's getting covered.
When these migrants are being interviewed and they tell the reporter that, yes, Joe Biden invited me. That's why we are here. This is why we have a crisis, folks. When they tell you, when the message goes out, when every Democrat candidate raised their hand and said, absolutely, I would provide free healthcare for any, illegal migrant who enters our country, that message is received loud and clear. So when they show up in Biden-Harris shirts and they tell reporters, I'm here because Joe Biden invited me, and this administration puts these kids in cages at a record level, this is a crisis of their own creation.
Crisis of their own creation.
I have to read this, guys, because it is obviously super sad what's happening at the border, but the Democrats' sort of heel turn is amusing.
It's something.
It really is. You got Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut put up this tweet over the weekend where he said, I think press should have some access, yes, but not unfettered, enough for accurate reporting on conditions. And then here in parentheses, which are challenging but improving, but not so much to disrupt the already tumultuous lives of these children. It's like these people called it concentration camps under President Trump. And now it's the press shouldn't have unfettered access to these facilities.
It's like, listen, folks, we should have some press, but not a free press. Are we serious?
That'd be
some fetters.
These are the worst people in the world. I'll just tell you. The people who decide to encourage migrant families who are absolutely at the end of the earth, right? They're in a horrible situation. They wouldn't travel by foot hundreds of miles to the border if they weren't. The people who encourage them to do that, who stand on the stage and raise their hand and say, I'm going to give you health care benefits. Just come to the border. We're going to take care of it. You should all be Americans. On day one, I'm going to pass legislation that welcomes you as an American citizen. The people who do that, and then they see thousands of people at the border and they throw them in cages and pretend like they don't know what's going on and pretend like it was the previous administration's policy challenges that have given them that. Those are the worst people in the world.
Exactly.
We're witnessing in real time. We're witnessing in real time the failure of liberal border policy. And this was, like you said, goes all the way back to the Democratic primary in 2020. And, they rolled out the welcome mat saying, come here, amnesty, free health care. And this is what happens. This shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. But Correct. This is a failure, a systemic failure by the Democrats of their liberal immigration policy. And this is how it will always go down. It's almost how they want it to go down.
Right.
Well,
Because if you know this,
that's a funny point. I brought this up with Leader McConnell, and I'm not gonna read out what he has to say. You got to listen to it for yourself. But that's his point. What you just said. This is the intent. This isn't like a
Yep. It's not coincidence, folks.
an accident. If you watch any of the media coverage of this crisis at the border, what you'll find is very quickly they pull back from the issue of migrants in these facilities to the issue of, gosh, we could solve this tomorrow if we only got comprehensive immigration reform. And when they say that, what they mean is they want amnesty for everyone that's here illegally immediately.
Yes.
And it's like that conversation just draws more migrants to the border every day.
Unless you believe for a second that their amnesty policy is based on human rights. It's not. They clearly don't care about human rights, or they wouldn't be dealing with what they're dealing with on the border right now. The reason that they want that is political. They believe cynically, which is hilarious that they took a step back in 2020 on this, by the way. But they cynically believe that new migrants to the country are automatically Democratic voters because they are the ones advocating for their citizenship.
Well, that's
right?
the thing is, so the other day the news came out. Peter Hassan picked up on this, where Border Patrol in the Rio Grande Valley are releasing illegal crossers into the U.S. without a court date.
Yeah.
Yeah. Remember, that was the thing that Biden always said back during the Democratic primary was, you know what we've actually found, the statistics show, is you don't have to hold all these people in migrant facilities. You give them a court date, they'll definitely come back. And now they're not even doing that.
Not even doing that. So no court date. And then they want to also get HR 1, which doesn't require any voter ID, which allows for ballot harvesting. Wow.
It's all about that. Let's get right into the HR 1 thing, because I know that's the audience wants to hear it. Everybody wants to hear it, but there's a connection. The point is, what we just talked about with border policies is imminently connected to their first legislative priority, which is trying to rig elections, frankly.
It's the Corrupt Politicians Act. That's what it is. They want to take power away from individual states to have reasonable ballot security measures. Just show your ID. It's easy, folks. They want to take all that power out from individual states, and they want to bring it all in so Dems can call the shots in D.C.
Right. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer want to federalize our elections. They want to make the public contribute to their campaigns, and they want to weaken state election laws. So when you hear HR 1, think Corrupt Politicians Act, because that's what it is.
Bingo.
And this has been, I'll add, they've been trying to do this for years. They got their foot in the door because of COVID. And now they are couching all of these priorities, which have absolutely nothing to do with participation in elections. It's just democratic participations in the election. They're couching it all under some sort of like civil rights issue, which is just shocking. Imagine if a Republican decided just for a second to insinuate that populations in the country can't figure out how to produce an ID.
Isn't that something?
But that's the core of their argument. The core of their argument is that there are huge segments that are based on race, on identity, on skin color, that don't have access to getting IDs.
It was like when Biden said that people of color don't know how to use computers to sign up for vaccines.
I mean,
it's beyond patronizing. It's insulting.
It's totally insulting. It's completely ridiculous, and it has nothing to do with it, right?
And I mean, that seems to be a tactic that they constantly use. And like we told you folks, it's all interconnected, where the thing is they want to get rid of the Senate filibuster so they can push all of this through. That's the filibuster is pretty much the only thing standing between Schumer and passing this bill. And thank God we're getting the word out on this. There's a lot of groups out there. Heritage Action is getting the word out on this. They spent like $10 million on a blitz that's happening right now to get the word out on this.
Yeah. So to put a little more meat on the bone there, Smug, on the federal level, Heritage Action is organizing. They've got 2 million grassroots activists to stop HR1. They're running ads. They're educating voters. They're getting activists to call Congress. It's great. It's great because the key to stopping HR1, the Corrupt Politicians Act, as we're calling it, is to preserve the Senate filibuster. All of these Democrats who used the filibuster countless times during the last administration, now suddenly it's a relic of Jim Crow.
That's the thing is they will call this racist without being held accountable for the fact that when, Senator Tim Scott put forth a police reform bill, they filibustered it. It's not racist to use it against Tim Scott, but it's racist now.
Well, yeah, and I mean they're going all in on that angle, Smug. They got Stacey Abrams. Again, this is a woman, and we've talked about this previously on the podcast, a woman who has claimed that her own election was stolen, has never conceded that she lost.
Mm-hmm.
And she's working with these Democrats to pass HR1 to kill any bill in Georgia that would actually promote common sense election laws. It's massive, a coordinated effort to attack fair elections. And on the state level, Heritage Action is leading the fight to secure and strengthen election laws. Basically, like you had said, Smug, they're spending $10 million and they're targeting Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Iowa, Michigan, Nevada, Texas, Wisconsin. Large issue advocacy campaign. They're going to mobilize grassroots activists across the country. They're doing a voter transparency television and digital campaign to educate voters on all of these reforms and, working with state legislatures.
So it's not just federal.
No, because here's the problem is, and we learned a lot about this in 2020. It's like, if we can stop HR1 on the federal level, great. Absolutely great. But ultimately, states manage their elections.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can't, if you can't organize locally to fight back on a lot of this nonsense, like getting rid of voter ID laws, all that sort of stuff, then we don't stand a chance.
That's the thing is they know. So you look at what their aims are. It's like DC statehood, making sure they have a permanent majority. They want to federalize elections so that they can bring the same practices that they use in California to coast, every red state. Nowhere would be safe from them.
And the thing is that this stuff is not all that sexy, right? It's not the stuff that makes everybody motivated to go get out and become a Republican or become a conservative or whatever. But it's the stuff that allows you to be.
Exactly.
Right? And that's why, Heritage Action, I'm glad we have McConnell on the program today because this is a guy who it basically how he became leader in a lot of ways because of his efforts in the 90s against McCain-Feingold. He fought it for 10 years before it ultimately became law. And almost everything that he said did come true about what happens when you try to limit speech. It just explodes the system. And so anyway, look, this is a life or death type thing for conservatives out there. If you're not into it, you need to go to saveourelections.com, saveourelections.com. It's a site that has been sponsored by Heritage. And there's a bunch of good information on it. You can sign up. You can be a part of that movement. I would encourage you to do so because honestly, it's really, really important.
I'm very, very, very grateful that Heritage Action sponsored this program. We've been talking about this issue relentlessly because it is so important. Like you were saying, Holmes, it's not sexy, but somebody's got to do it. I'm glad they're doing it. Again, visit saveourelections.com, get involved, help us win this.
So let's get to the candy here, which is the interview with Cocaine Mitch.
Let's do it.
Leader Mitch McConnell, welcome to Ruthless.
Glad to be with you.
I was counting on the staff giving you a rigorous prep session for this interview because I know that this one is really probably likely to be the most significant interview that you've done in months.
I'm sure.
We've been noticing, look, you've made a lot of headlines in the last week, and I know Smug has been up to date on the border issue. And Smug, I know you had some thoughts that you wanted to try to get here.
Yeah, so pretty much that is right now, in my opinion, the biggest story you're seeing. The headlines constantly of the crisis that's happening at the border. And I want to ask, are you surprised by like the ignorance and level of how unprepared the Biden administration was in handling this crisis at the border?
No. I think given what the new president said during the campaign, you could expect a wave of desperate people to be heading to our borders, and that's exactly what happened. And it's been, well, nothing about this is amusing, but it's almost amusing to hear Mayorkas claim it isn't a crisis. And he still refuses to use the word, even though they sent the Federal Emergency Management Agency down there, which is what they do, go to crises. Entirely predictable, and they're struggling with it. And the previous administration actually did an excellent job of controlling the border, and they have been busily at work on doing all the elements that that made the border secure. A perfect example of that was people being detained on the Mexican side of the border rather than on our side, where they are being basically released.
Yeah, it's just a horrible problem, and I don't see them getting to a good answer anytime soon. I mean, it appears to me like when you can't even acknowledge the problem, you got a tough time coming up with a solution.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is what they anticipated, and I gather the activist groups who have influence in the Democratic Party prefer this kind of outcome.
Yeah,
and we're back to where we started.
Yeah, well, it's hard not to note the political side of this, as you just mentioned, because basically everything about the Democratic agenda, whether it be House or Senate Democrats or the Biden administration, is political in nature. I mean, everything from H.R. 1, their first priority being a political endeavor, to elimination of the filibuster for the purposes of statehood for D.C. I mean, it just appeared like basically everything they're trying to do here is gain political power.
Yeah, and they want to do it in a hurry because they're afraid that their window of opportunity might not be open all that long. And it is curious, though, if you look out at the Congress, the 50-50 Senate, and a few seats separating the majority from the minority in the House, I don't see a mandate. They don't have a mandate to do this kind of stuff. I know what a mandate looks like. That was Barack Obama in 2008. We were down to 40 senators. It took us 6 years to climb out of that hole. They don't have a mandate, but they're afraid that all of this will come to an end in 22, and they need to move quickly and solidify power. And that's what you mentioned, H.R. 1. For your listeners, that's the Democratic plan to take over the American election system and have it run from Washington in every conceivable way, which they consider will benefit them. And it may, I mean, the most egregious example in it is they turned the Federal Election Commission, which has historically been a 3-3 agency on purpose to keep neither side from exploiting the other, into a 3-2 agency with the tiebreaker appointed by the president. So they want to change the system to benefit themselves, and they want to have, instead of a referee, they want the FEC to be a prosecutor.
And that's the most interesting part of this to me. It's always cloaked in the idea of getting people to vote, but you've been on the front lines of this going back all the way to McCain-Feingold and the role that you played in the campaign finance debates. But really, as Democrats approach these issues, it's never really about getting people to vote. It's getting Democrats to vote.
Yeah, I mean, we had record turnouts last year. There's fewer Americans are sitting on the sidelines and not participating than ever. So this is not to drive up turnout. Turnout's already driven up. It's to take over the Federal Election Commission so it can be a prosecutor. It's to provide public funding for elections. It's to provide the same-day registration, which I just looked at a survey that said 81% of the American people are concerned about something like that leading to vote fraud. It's about eliminating voter ID at the polls, which the American people support 72 to 25. And it also mandates what's called ballot harvesting. That is going around and picking up ballots of other people. The American people, when that's explained to them, oppose it 83 to 16. So this is not about anything other than trying to help the Democrats win elections in perpetuity.
It really does seem like their initial push, like, it's so telling of an administration's first 100 days of what their priorities are. But it really seems like the Biden administration, the Democrats right now, have the idea of focusing and centralizing power within D.C. and within just their party, whether it's eliminating the filibuster or H.R. 1 or stacking the FEC. And now, for some time now, they've been talking about trying to stack the courts and pack the courts. So it seems like that's their main focus right now, especially given that they don't have a mandate.
Yeah, well, and also they want to change the makeup of the Senate by admitting 2 new states, D.C. and Puerto Rico, to give them, virtual certainty 4 new Democratic senators forever. So you change the makeup of the Senate, you break the rules of the Senate to be able to get what you want all the time.
And in line with all of that is, I noticed last week you had remarks regarding the Iowa 2 situation, where we had the Congresswoman on our program actually last week to talk about it. But Nancy Pelosi's effort to overturn an election that has been certified in the state of Iowa.
Sounds like they were preaching that in November and December, that state certification was sacrosanct. I guess it's sacrosanct when it isn't, except when it isn't. And this is, every time I think they can't reach a new low, they do. And they seem to be on the cusp of setting aside a certified winner. Admittedly, it was a close election, and seating the Democrat instead. That's where they seem to be headed.
It's just such a jarring reversal in less than 60 days from where they were with the Electoral College and all of that. I can't help but notice, for all of the outside consternation by organizations about whether they would ever support Republicans who, either voted to overturn the Electoral College or some way participated in that, aren't those organizations sort of obligated to take the same approach to what Nancy Pelosi is trying to do?
Well, hypocrisy is not unheard of in Washington, but this is jaw-dropping hypocrisy.
And is that to say that you're not holding your breath, that everybody's going to hold them accountable?
No, technically the House does determine who is seated in the House, but for goodness sake, certification of state elections should be in the final word, rather than the majority deciding who gets to have a seat.
Yeah, no question about it. Well, the only way they're able to do anything other than the Iowa stuff that we talked about is if they eliminate the filibuster. And I know you've been remarkably clear on that for years. Just what do you think is at stake for conservatives in this fight?
Everything. If they turn the Senate into a simple majority body, the essence of the Senate is lost. It's been forever the place where bad ideas die and where compromises are made. Washington himself, not predicting the filibuster, but was asked at the Constitutional Convention, what do you think the Senate will be like? He said, I think it'll be like the saucer underneath the teacup. The tea will slosh out of the cup down into the saucer and cool off. It was always going to be a place where things were slowed down, thought over, bad ideas were killed, and compromises that could be reached were reached. These folks are not interested in compromise. They're interested in passing all of their bills to remake America in spite of the mandate that they did not get last year as rapidly as possible. And the filibuster is what prevents that. So it looks like we're down to two brave Democrats, Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Kirsten Sinema of Arizona, preserving the institution.
Yeah, I remember, a wise man once said, "You'll regret this, and you may regret this a lot sooner than you think." Trying to advise individuals about the importance of having the Senate not based on a simple majority. What kind of consequences do you think the Democrats would face if they allowed this to happen? And then, if somehow, despite their efforts to increase the number of Democrat states in the Senate, what kind of ramifications do you think that would have for them?
Well, the wise man I think you were referring to was me. I said that after they changed one of the rules back in 2013 to expedite the executive calendar. The Senate has two calendars, executive calendar for nominations, which was historically done on a simple majority basis, and the legislative calendar. Well, here, I think if they destroy the essence of the Senate, the legislative filibuster, they will find a Senate that will not function. It takes unanimous consent to turn the lights on here, and I think they would leave an angry 50 senators not interested in being cooperative on even the simplest things. So my point being, it may not be the panacea that they anticipate it would be. It could turn the Senate into sort of a nuclear winter, where the aftermath of the so-called nuclear option is not a sustainable place.
Well, speaking of nuclear, we were wanting to get have you weigh in on among the many colorful nicknames you've accrued over the past few years, whether it's Nuclear Mitch, Cocaine Mitch, Midnight Mitch, Grim Reaper Mitch. Which among those is your favorite?
One you didn't mention. My favorite was Darth Vader.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Yeah, that was from the campaign finance wars of a couple of decades ago, and it looks like we're about to have them again. I revere all of my nicknames, but Darth Vader was my favorite.
I particularly liked when you answered your phone Cocaine Mitch for like 6 months. That was good. That was a nice touch. So we've got 3 questions that we've got to get to that are hand-selected by the cast and crew of Ruthless to get to the core of all of our guests. And the first one is Mitch McConnell's last meal on Earth. What would it be?
Halibut, supplied by the Alaska Senators, and the best fish that ever came out of the ocean.
That's something. That's something. Didn't you go fishing for halibut once up in Alaska?
Salmon, but halibut is even better.
That's good. All right. Well, that's a good one. Second question: if you weren't involved in politics, what would you be doing with your life?
Well, I'd be missing politics, but I think I'd probably be in the business world, trying to run businesses, taking them from startups as far as my ingenuity could take them.
That's great.
And tolerating the inevitable setbacks that you have when you try that.
Yeah, in life as in politics, right?
Yep.
Third question. And I told your comms director that if you answer, I know the answer to this that you're going to provide, but if you're trying to fib, I'm going to call you on it. So the third question is, what motivates Mitch McConnell more, the thrill of victory or the agony of defeat?
Oh, the thrill of victory.
I don't believe you. Don't believe you. I have celebrated enormous victories with you, and you've enjoyed them for about 10 minutes.
Well, I've tried to avoid the agony of defeat, and so far been very fortunate in that regard.
Yes, you have. Maybe that's it. We haven't crossed that bridge. But I've never met an individual, and I don't know Michael Jordan personally, so I don't. Maybe he goes above this, but I've never met an individual so motivated by avoiding defeat than you.
Well, the late great Richard Nixon said, "Don't enjoy your triumphs too much because they probably won't last." And for him, they surely didn't.
Yeah, that's sound advice.
It's sound advice from someone who knows, right?
Yeah.
Spug had one more question about bourbon because he's a bourbon connoisseur.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no way you can't ask Mitch McConnell about bourbon, but coming from the great state of Kentucky, which distillery or what bourbon is your personal favorite?
Well, I have 3 daughters. That would be like asking me which of my daughters I preferred. No Kentucky politician will ever pick one bourbon. So I know it sounds terribly political, but I'm going to have to dodge that one. That could be a fatal mistake.
That's right.
Then my follow-up would be, what's your favorite bourbon cocktail?
I think an old fashioned. I do like a Manhattan as well.
Those are both
Two solid
solid
picks.
Both solid. Well, Leader, listen, we can't thank you enough for joining us. You are on the front lines once again. You've helped lead us back in 2009 from unified democratic government, and I know you can do it again. We're all rooting you on, and you have an open line here whenever you got something you want to talk about.
Great. Thanks a lot, guys. I enjoyed it.
So, I mean, clearly, look, this is my former boss. This is someone who I just adore. In many ways, he's like family to me, as I've mentioned in the program before. But what I like most about him from a political perspective is he's just all business all the time.
Well, I appreciate you bringing back the question. The most important question, in my opinion, is the favorite bourbon. What's your bourbon cocktail? I mean, it's a Kentucky guy through and through. And the one question next, if we can get him back, it's a controversial one, folks. We have had on the program 2 former Mitch McConnell chief of staffs, Josh Holmes and Stephen Law. Next time we can get Mitch, I want to ask him, who's the all-time greatest chief of staff? You can have one. Who is it?
You bastard.
A battle. A battle.
Bastard. I'm just frankly really thankful you didn't ask him that.
I gotta say, I mean, the last question, thrill of victory or agony of defeat.
I think he was trolling me.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think he was trolling me. I mean, I told him I was going to call him out. I know the way that, I mean, look, I've worked with him closely for 15 years. There is nobody who hates to lose more than Mitch McConnell. Nobody. And I mean, nobody. It keeps him up at night, right? This is somebody who is driven entirely, in my view, by the idea that someone can pull one over on him. I think that's kind of a Midwestern thing, by the way. I grew up with the same thing, and I've noticed a lot of answers from a lot of our guests. There's a regional component to it in a lot of ways. But then when he said it's the thrill of victory, I was like, no.
Well, he just loves saying he's never lost. You know,
I know that's what it was.
But let's be honest. It's the fear that you might lose that drives you every day to give 100%. And that's why he's been so successful for so long. And I got to tell a little story here. Because I mean, like Holmes, I mean, you know this, I didn't start my career being a Mitch McConnell guy.
No, you were telling us.
Right. You know, so for the listeners, you know, I mean, like I really started out in sort of like grassroots movement, you know, conservative politics. And, you know, when I got into the consulting side, I got hired, you know, on the 2014 race for the McConnell campaign.
When you can't beat him, hire him. That's the thing.
And I'll never forget this. I'll never forget this. When I went into the first meeting at campaign headquarters, and you know, Leader McConnell's there, and he's sitting down with all the grassroots folks, you know, like, you know, all the field directors, everybody who's, you know, they're all over the state, right, at the local level, and they've come back into the headquarters in Louisville to basically give their field report to the boss. And McConnell sits there, person after person, and he can name down to the local judicial race, who's going to be on the ballot, and what that's going to do to turnout, and how that's going to impact his margins in various counties. And it was just having not worked in the McConnell world yet, it was really eye-opening to see that a guy who's, leader of the party in the Senate would be that focused. But that's what it requires to do his job.
Yep.
And it was just like, I'd never seen anything like that at that sort of high level. And it really impressed me from that day. And at that point, I was a McConnell person for life.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, I didn't start there either. Right. But I ended up there. And the thing that you appreciate right away is that actual victory in politics, whether it be policies or whether it be campaigns, it requires a huge amount of work, total attention to detail, and expertise, right? And we gloss over all that shit in the cable news culture, right? It's like hey, what's he saying today? Is it controversial? Is he, whatever? And not that there's not a place for that, but you also need people who can win, who are driven intensely every day, tortured by the idea that they could possibly lose something to a lib. And that's Mitch McConnell.
That's the thing. You want to make a point or you want to make a difference.
That's right. That's right. It's sort of his motto. Anyway, we thank him for coming on the program. It had been a couple months. I think he wanted to test it out and see if we could actually be successful before coming on this thing. He didn't want to be gratuitous about it. But anyway.
And we have been. And, thank you so much to our listeners. Our numbers keep going up. It's honestly, I never thought we'd be hitting these numbers. But we are so appreciative to all our listeners. And we're going to have a heck of a show this Thursday that we'll tease it on Wednesday.
Yeah, we'll give you a teaser.
Yeah. But until then, minions, keep the faith, hold the line, and own the libs. We'll see you on Thursday. Stay ruthless.